You're listening to the Mommy Labor Nurse Podcast, episode number 44. Hey guys, okay, so if you've been following me, you know I just had a baby about exactly 2 weeks from today, and I'm super excited because this episode is his birth story. So I had a baby boy 2 weeks ago. He was 7 pounds, 3 ounces. Born on August 12th at 4:35 in the morning. And I had a baby boy. And I didn't know that he was a boy during my pregnancy. If you've been following along, I'm sure that you have. But I didn't know that he was a boy. So he was a surprise gender. And yeah, just went through this episode and talked about his whole birth story and kind of leading up to me going into labor, what I kind of did to get myself into labor, and then we just kind of completely go through his story, my thoughts, how stuff felt, and lots of other things. And a very cool thing about this episode is this is actually not a solo episode. So with Walter's birth, if you go back to an earlier episode, I think it was episode 2 of the Mommy Labor Nurse Podcast, I did a solo episode and I talked about Walter's birth, giving birth to him at the hospital that I work at, and, you know, giving birth without an epidural, and just, you know, his whole birth story. I just kind of went through and talked about it, but I wanted to do this one a little bit differently. So I actually had my sister and my other employee, Tiffany, who is also a labor and delivery nurse, kind of do an interview style and interview me about my birth story. And I think it was just a really, really great way to have me share everything. So yeah, we did just that, and I thought it was super cool, and you guys are going to have to let me know if you liked this, style where I had both my girls come on here and us all talk about things, because I'd love to, you know, do more episodes like this, and, you know, maybe not just personal episodes where I'm talking about my birth story or like my personal stuff, but, you know, we can do kind of include Jenna and Tiffany in more podcast episodes. So yeah, without further ado, let's get into the birth story of my second baby boy, Ryland.
You're listening to the Mommy Labor Nurse Podcast, where we firmly believe in the power of education when it comes to giving birth. Tune in each week as we dive into pregnancy-related topics, expert interviews, and a variety of birth stories. As a reminder, anything you hear on this podcast is not medical advice. Please see mommylabornurse.com/disclaimer for more details. And now, here's your host, educator, registered nurse, and fellow mom, Liesel Teen.
Hi, Tiffany and Jenna. Welcome to the Mommy Labor Nurse Podcast. Thank you guys so much for being here today. So this is a special episode, guys, because first of all, I have 2 guests, and I know them personally in my life and work-wise. They both are my employees. So we are doing my birth story today, guys. So I wanted to, I guess, welcome you guys and have you guys kind of just introduce yourselves briefly, and then we can get started. So Tiffany, why don't you start, and then we'll let Jenna talk about herself too.
Sure. So my name's Tiffany, and Liesel and I have known each other for, I don't even know, 12 years or so, maybe a little longer than that. I am also a labor and delivery nurse. Liesel and I actually work together on the same floor. We've been working together there for 5 years or so. And then our families are really interconnected and intertwined as well. I started working for Mommy Labor Nurse about 6 months ago, and am excited to join the team full time here in a couple of months. Weeks.
Yeah, that's good. I know. Yeah, no, it's funny. I mean, we could go on and on about like our relationship and how intertwined we are because we really are. It's kind of funny, but we'll save that for another day. All right. So Jenna, tell us about yourself. I think people probably know you a little bit more because we see your face a little bit more, but go ahead and tell people who you are.
So if you don't know who I am, I'm Jenna, Liesel's sister. So I have been her assistant since probably last July, so about a year now. And yeah, I do a lot of the background stuff. I answer all her emails, do all sorts of stuff for her. So I've been really enjoying working for my sister. She is a great boss.
Thanks. So today, guys, we're going to do my birth story. And I thought about just doing this solo and sitting down and just kind of like talking to you guys solo, but I figured it would be a little bit more entertaining if we did this sort of like an interview style questionnaire. So Tiffany and Jenna are going to kind of take the reins and ask me through my birth story. They both kind of know what happened. I've kind of talked to them already about it, but yeah, I thought that would just be a little bit more entertaining than me just sitting here, talking solo. So Tiffany, if you want to start, I guess we can start with the first question, and I'll just let you go ahead and you guys both go ahead and lead.
All right. So I thought it might be kind of fun for your followers and listeners to give us a quick recap of Walter's birth before we dive into Ryland's birth.
Yeah, sure. So I did record, I think it's episode 2 of the podcast that I recorded a full story of Walter's birth if you want to go back and really listen to it. But just briefly, I went, I guess not completely unmedicated, but didn't get an epidural with him, labored early at my house for about 12 hours. Yeah, 12-ish hours. I got up to the hospital. I was like 5 centimeters dilated, got my water broken by my provider, labored for another few hours, ended up getting 2 doses of IV pain medication. And I tried nitrous oxide, but I didn't like it at all. So did that for a couple hours, did a lot of position changes, did a lot of, hopping in and out of the shower, and ended up eventually kind of losing my mind at the end and wanting an epidural at the end, but I didn't end up getting an epidural, and delivered him. I think I pushed for 25 or 30 minutes with him. And yeah, he was born right at 3 a.m. No real super bad complications or anything. It was great. I mean, I feel like if I hadn't had him the way that I had him and had such a super empowering, like awesome, amazing birth, there might not be mommy labor nurse. So yeah, that's just quick recap, but there's a lot more to it. So if you want to go back and really listen to it, it's episode 2 of the podcast.
Cool. Okay. Well, I had a question, and this also, I guess, applies to Walter's birth, but why in the first place did you want your births to go unmedicated?
Yeah, so I get this question a lot, and it's kind of, I don't know, it's a lot of different reasons. And actually with this birth, like with Ryland and this pregnancy, I did totally contemplate possibly getting an epidural with him because my reasons, I guess, were a little bit different. But anyways, with Walter, really the main reason that I wanted to try and go, as completely unmedicated as I possibly could and not get an epidural was because my mom had a C-section with me, and she very similar, like labored for a really, really long time, and then eventually got an epidural and was pushing for 2 or 3 hours with me. And I, got quote unquote got stuck, but it was just failure to descend. I just, wasn't coming down, and she ended up having a C-section with me. And I've seen that happen to a decent amount of patients, I can't evidently based say that it's due to epidurals, but I wanted to kind of give myself the best possible shot at not having a C-section with him. So, just from my practice, I said, hey, I'm going to try and, take out as many interventions as I can. And that means induction and epidurals. So that was really the main reason. And then once I started to kind of do more research, and just read more stories and listen to more people talk about a medicated, natural kind of births, it got me really, really excited and really, really into it. So yeah, just wanted to, and then I just kind of wanted to see what all the fuss, this is bad, but I wanted to see what all the fuss was about. Like I wanted to actually experience labor, and see kind of what it was all about. So yeah, went into it knowing that. I I'd say I definitely went into it with an open mind, though. I mean, knowing that I could get to a point where I was like, okay, I definitely can't do this, guys. Like I need an epidural, but yeah, wanted to give it my best shot. And then with Ryland, same deal, but I knew that my chances were higher if I had an epidural, that I would have a vaginal delivery and I could avoid a C-section because my body had done it once before. So I knew that if I did ultimately want an epidural with him, I probably would be successful in having vaginal delivery. So really did contemplate it at the beginning, but then I was like, you know what? I've done it once before. I can probably do it again. And I did. So thankfully, and we'll hear more about it later. But yeah, that's just kind of in a nutshell, I guess, why.
Yeah.
So just, obviously I'm a labor and delivery nurse too, and we see a lot of women give birth with epidurals, without epidurals. Is there any part of, our job and watching women giving birth without pain medication that scared you or made you nervous going into both of your deliveries? And, sometimes we talk about like ignorance is bliss and how we wish we didn't know anything.
Yeah.
But then on the other hand, it's like having all the information we had also really prepares us. So like, what were you feeling in both of your pregnancies, knowing as much information that and then trying to move forward with that and give birth without an epidural or pain medication?
Yeah, I think I was a lot more anxious the first time, because you're totally right that there is a degree, education is power, right? That's like what my whole brand is about. But there is a degree, or like almost like a gray line of like when you know too much. And I'll talk a little bit more about that too later when we talk more about Ryland's birth, because that definitely played a part. Like there were parts of his birth where I knew too much, and it was, I was scared and just, I was getting in my own head. But I think during pregnancy with Walter, I was definitely a lot more anxious, because I know complications that happen. And, if this happens, then this happens. And what if, and all of this. Ryland, I definitely that was not circling in my head. But definitely during both of their births, there were parts where I knew that, oh my gosh, like with Ryland's birth, I'm starting to stall. I'm starting to think about, getting in my head, oh my gosh, like why am I stalling? What do I need to do? Blah, 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 blah. And then there was a part when his heart rate went down, and I'm like freaking out, like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have a C-section, or she's going to vacuum, and, all of this stuff. And then with Walter's birth, yeah, there was definitely more. I had OP kind of labors, posterior labors, really bad back labors with both. But I would say definitely with Walter's birth, the back pain was getting in my head a lot more. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm having all this crazy back pain. This is not going as fast as it needs to go, even though it totally was. Like I was, that's just me and my labor nurse brain. But yeah, I was thinking, oh my gosh, I'm having all this back pain. He's posterior. I had just had a patient, I remember before I went into labor with Walter, that had a posterior labor and posterior positioning, and she ended up having a C-section. And I'm like thinking about that while I'm in the labor with Walter, like, oh my gosh, I'm having all this back pain. I'm going to end up having a C-section, like that's just negative kind of thoughts going through my head. So yeah, that was, I would say, definitely, yeah, there is a line. I'll just end it with that.
Okay, so let's start talking about the week leading up to your due date. So what kinds of things were you doing to help prep your body for labor?
Yeah, so let's see, I don't even know kind of where to start. I did all the things. I think I did everything except the midwives brew, which is that brew that has castor oil in it. That's actually on my website. I was saving that till like the day before I was possibly going to get induced, but I pretty much did everything, guys. I got my stripped. I walked a lot. I did curb walking. I sat on my yoga ball a whole lot. I did even primrose oil, for a good week before week or week and a half before I went into labor. I ate pineapple. I ended up, and then the day before I had sex, but that's a given. And then the day before, or I guess a few hours before I went into labor, I did this series called the Mile Circuit, which we can link in the bottom of this, or in the show notes of this episode if you're interested in that. I did this thing called the Mile Circuit, and it's basically a series of positions that you can do to help your labor kind of speed up or kind of kickstart labor. So I did that. And then I went and got a reflexology session, and that's kind of like acupuncture, really strong acupuncture on your feet. And then I went into labor a few hours later. So yeah, did all the things. I was 3 centimeters, kind of leading up to it. So that's something that I teach in my classes too, that it's not as important to do the things to try and put yourself into labor, but it's kind of more important to do those things to prep your cervix. So that was my intention behind doing all the things. But yeah, that's just a general recap of things that I did. I can't think of anything else that I did.
And didn't you say that you had that reflexology massage with Walter? And that
I did.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah,
I did. Yeah. And I did that. Did I do that the day before I went into labor with him? I don't remember.
I think so.
I think it was.
Sure
yeah.
You did it on.
It was either the day before or it was 2 days before. No, it was the day before. It was the day before. Yeah. And then this one, it was 2 hours before. So maybe maybe it actually does work.
Who knows?
So you delivered Ryland at 40 weeks and 5 days.
Yes.
How were you feeling, physically, emotionally, mentally, as you saw that due date come and go and still no baby?
Yeah. So I would say physically, I felt good. I felt good physically through my whole pregnancy, even towards the end. I mean, I was still sleeping pretty well, some aches and pains there, but here and there, but nothing like super, super crazy. Emotionally, mentally, I would say, yeah, I would, as you start to see the due date come and go, you're like, really, I'm going to go over my due date again, but also knowing that this is very typical. And I went over my due date with Walter. So like, why wouldn't I go over my due date with Ryland? But I don't know. I had this thought through my whole pregnancy that I wasn't going to go over my due date. So when I finally got to my due date, I was like, what the heck? Why am I not trusting, why is my intuition wrong? But yeah, I would say I was definitely mentally, not upset, but just like, oh, come on, really? Like, why am I not going into labor? And then, yeah, it was good. I finally, a few days after my due date, I think it was like that Monday, because my rollover days are Friday. So it was probably 40 and 2 or 40 and 3 when I was finally like, okay, you know what? I'm too grounded in I'm too deep in social media. I need to just unplug and take some time off and really just relax. And then the next day I ended up going into labor. So yeah, eventually when I finally was not as concerned with it and not just, I mean, I don't know, maybe that really helped just to really unplug for a good day and just relax and do my reflexology.
Yeah, I'm sure that really did help, especially just, all that pressure from DMs you get, did you have the baby? Did you have the baby? I know it kind of drove Tiffany and I insane because we were the ones going through your DMs oh my gosh, so many people are betting on this baby coming. And it just kept going day by day. But anyways, Tuesday evening is when you finally went into labor. So can you kind of go into great detail of those final 24 hours before labor kicked in?
Yeah. So I would say Monday, I went into the office that Monday and did some work for that week. And then, gosh, I don't even remember really exactly what I did on Monday. I think I probably did some more labor stuff like curb walking and bouncing on my ball and all that good stuff. Tuesday, I had Walter. He didn't go to school that day, so we just kind of hung out at the house. And then, did that mile circuit probably at 4 o'clock or so in the afternoon. And that was actually really relaxing because the first two positions, you're kind of laying ish. Well, the first one, you're kind of upside down, but the second one, you're kind of just relaxing. And Walter was really good that day. He was just playing by himself the whole time that I was doing this. So, did the mile circuit. And then I kind of immediately after that, I had a reflexology session at 5:30. So I went and did that. And then, came home. My husband had cooked dinner. He cooked this, we call it sausage and peppers, but it's like sausage, like kielbasa sausage and peppers and onions and pasta. And I had that for lunch. And then I remember as I was eating, I had a couple stronger contractions. I've been having contractions all day on and off, but nothing to write home about, like just painful ones, but nothing too crazy. So I remember I was eating dinner and I had a couple of them, and it was about 7:30, 7:45, and Walter goes to bed about 8:30. So I was like, okay, I'm going to put him to bed a little bit early because these are hurting a little bit more. And I remember I really, really wanted to put him to bed because I was thinking that like that was going to be the night. And, there wasn't a whole lot of more nights where it was just me and him. So I was like, oh, I really want to put him to bed early and just put him to bed. So I did. And I remember we were like brushing teeth and putting PJs on, and I'm like, okay, this is something. Now I can't really ignore these anymore. So put him to bed. And then they just started to get stronger. And I mean, they were pretty close initially. I would say they started off at probably 3 to 5 minutes apart. And then they weren't super long. They weren't super crazy painful yet, but enough for me to be like, okay, this is something. That was kind of the start of it all.
So I know with Walter, you've told me this, that the day before you had him, you felt like you were in this like fog haze. Your mind felt like kind of cloudy. And I don't know if you probably knew at the time, feeling that way, that you were going to, have him the next day or go into labor the next day.
Yeah.
But like looking back onto Ryland now, do you feel like you had any sense those 24 hours before you actually went into labor? Like, was it similar to Walter and you felt anything at all? Or were you just like totally clueless when you woke up Tuesday morning and you actually were in labor?
No, I was totally clueless. I mean, I had a feeling that it was coming soon just because of the timing of it and that I was 40 weeks and 5 days. But no, I remember, another thing is I went over to my parents' house that day too. And I had a couple of them. And I remember thinking, oh man, this is obviously, because we go over once a week. This is obviously the last time I'm going to come over to my parents' house before I have the baby. But no, I would say I woke up Tuesday morning. I do remember very vividly with Walter feeling like I was kind of in a fog, and I've talked about that with you, and I think I've talked about it on my platform before, just the weirdness of it. It's like you're not sick, but you just kind of mentally feel foggy. But yeah, did not feel that with Ryland. And maybe I just attribute that to being busy and having another kid, and you're not maybe as in tune with, I don't know, yourself. I don't know, but no, the answer is definitely no. Had no idea that I was like truly going into labor that night.
So we kind of touched on when you first found out you were in labor, but how did Brian react when he first found out you were in labor?
Yeah, so it was funny. He was upstairs in his office, like playing a game. He's a game. I guess I can call him a gamer. I don't know. But he was playing a video game, and he had gone upstairs. Yeah. So I was like, I'm going to put Walter to bed. You can go up, play your game if you want to. He's like, okay. So he went upstairs, started playing his game while I was putting Walter to bed. I put him to bed, and then I came out of his room, is right next to Brian's office, came out of his room, and I had been having some stronger ones. And I came into his room and I was like, hey, just so you know, this is what's going on. I'm 90% sure this is going to happen tonight, but still, I guess not 100% sure, but I'll keep you posted. And yeah, he kind of reacted the same way that he did with Walter, where it was like bug eyes and like, oh crap, okay, this is actually happening tonight. So I think it was good that he was playing a video game, because he was like still playing it, and he had to finish up his game, and he was talking to his friends. So kind of kept him occupied, because that was something that totally drove me crazy with Walter's birth, that I told him that I was in labor, and then he's like asking me questions and like, okay, when are we going to go to the hospital? Okay, what is this going to, and he's like doing all this stuff around the house and blah, blah, blah. And he's like driving me crazy. So he was just like, okay, all right, that sounds good. But then he kept playing his video game, and I was like, okay, I'm going to go downstairs. I don't need you or anything. I can just, go take a shower and, chill, and I'll let you know. And at that point, I think he was like, okay, do you want to call your mom? Because that's another factor that we didn't have to deal with Walter's birth. Nobody had to take care of another child. But with Ryland's birth, yeah, I had to call my mom to come over, and she lives about 30 minutes away. So I had to kind of time it right. So he was like, do you want to call your mom yet? What do you want to do? Do you want to even put Walter to bed? Should we wake him up and have him just go? And I was like, no, I think he just needs to sleep here. I don't think we're at the point of calling my mom quite yet, but I'll let you know. So yeah, his reaction, very, very similar to Walter's, but I think it was better, just from experience, him knowing that, okay, this is game time. But yeah, it certainly helped that he was occupied with something, so he didn't completely drive me crazy in the next couple hours that I just kind of spent at home before leaving.
So one of the things that you shared in your story on Instagram was you hooked yourself up to your breast pump while you were at home. And a lot of your followers have sent you DMs asking, why did you do that? So can you explain just a little bit more the reasoning behind why you hooked yourself up to the breast pump before you went to the hospital?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, that was just purely, actually, I had texted I didn't even come up with that idea initially on my own, but I had texted the charge nurse who was on that night, because I knew I had written out like everybody who was working. So I knew just everybody who was working every night, every shift. So I texted the charge nurse, and I was like, hey, just so you know, like, I'm pretty sure I'm in labor. I'm going to come up in a little bit. They're not super strong yet, but like, this is what's going on. So she knew. And she said that. She was like, hey, go ahead, put your breast bump on, get them a little bit stronger. Maybe you'll show up and you'll be ready to push. And I'm like, oh, that's a great idea. So the reason why I did that was nipple stimulation. It releases the same hormones that you do during labor. It's called oxytocin. And yeah, that's just a kind of natural way to strengthen your contractions, very, very similarly to Pitocin, the synthetic form of oxytocin. So yeah, that's why I did that. I think I didn't do it for very long. I think I only did it for 15 or maybe 20 or 30 minutes on each side. And it definitely helped. It didn't get me to the point of me being able to push my baby out when I got to the hospital, but yeah, it definitely helped to strengthen them for sure. I sat on my ball, I put my breast pump on, and yeah, they definitely strengthened. But yeah, that's the reason why I did it. Just to help my body, kind of, because again, this is the labor nurse brain. I'm like, okay, let's just I want to do this fast. Let's just go. So it's just kind of a way for me to be like, okay, let's get the ball rolling. I'm ready to hop on the labor train, so to speak.
Yeah. So, how long approximately did you wait until actually going to the hospital, and what happened at the hospital once you got there?
Yeah. So I waited. So like I said, it was probably 7:30, 8 o'clock when I started contractions. And then I probably left my house at 11, I would say. So I was home for a good 3 hours. I called my mom at about 10:30 Yeah, because I think I put my breast pump on at like 10 and did that for a good 20, 30 minutes. And then I called my mom and she came and we left, got up to triage at 11:20 or so. But yeah, it was a good 3 hours. We were at home, or I was at home. Brian was there too, but I was at home. I think I did take a shower because I was like, okay, I remember I was like, I just want to wash my hair because I know I'm not going to probably wash my hair for a good few days. So I hopped in the shower and I washed my hair and I stayed in the shower for a little bit because the shower did feel really, really good on my back. Put on, my little dress that I like wore during labor and like a nice comfy sports bra. And then, called my mom, got up to triage at about 11:20 or so. And at that point, my contractions still about the same, a time frame, 3 to 5 minutes. They were a little bit, they're, definitely stronger, a little bit longer at this point. But definitely, the reason why I left was they were getting stronger. And I was like, okay, there's no need for me to really stay at this point. And I was also, my mom wouldn't have cared if I called her at 2 a.m, but I was also just like, let's just get her here. And I didn't really want her to be at my house and me being laboring for another few hours. Like I was just like, okay, let me just call her. And then once she shows up, we'll go ahead and go. So got up there to triage and my doctor came in and checked me, and I, unfortunately, in my head, I was upset, but she checked me and I was still only 3 centimeters, but I was a labor 3 centimeters. So before, during, in the week kind of leading up, I had gotten checked and I was 3 centimeters, 50% of face and like -2 station. So that can still be an indication that you're in labor, but that's more of not a super labory cervix. So when she checked me, I was still 3 centimeters, 3 open. But I was, I think 80%, 70 or 80% of face. So I was thinner out and then -1. So he was a little bit lower. And she said, she was like, okay, it feels like a labory cervix. She was like, I can't, quite admit you yet. So you want to hang out and triage for a little bit and then we'll recheck you in a little while to see, just make sure. Cause she that's what she does. She treated me just like any other patient that came through triage, which is fine. And I appreciate. So she was basically like, okay, let's hang out. Just make sure that these are real. And I was bummed because I was like, they are. I just want to get to my labor room. Cause I was like, I just want to get in the bathtub. That's all I wanted to do. So I was bummed that she checked me and I was still only 3 centimeters at that point, but it was fine. We hung out in triage. My husband put on some music and we hung out in triage and I did lots of hands and knees and labored there for a while. My nurse who came and took care of me later on, Judy, came to triage and kind of said, hey, and she was like, hey, I'm going to go, if you're in triage, I'm going to go like eat my lunch. And then when I come back, she'll probably or I'll come and check you again and see what's going on. So so Judy had gone, ate lunch. And then when she got back, I think it was probably an hour and a half after I got checked initially and I was at 3 centimeters that Judy came back because I think my doctor was in something else. I don't know. But Judy came and checked me and I was 6 centimeters at that point, 90%, so even thinner, and then 0 station, so he was even lower. So that made me feel a lot better because that just kind of validated that I was like, okay, guys, I'm definitely in labor. Like there's not any question. Like I probably, you could have admitted me an hour and a half ago, but okay, fine. We'll wait till I'm actually like the amount of centimeters. So 6 centimeters at that point. That felt good too, because that was an hour and a half of progress. And I was thinking at that point, okay, this is great progress. I'm thinking back to Walter's birth and it took me a lot longer to get to 6 centimeters, from 3. So I was happy with that check and Judy was like, okay, great. Let me put your IV in. I got a, little saline lock just so I had IV access, but put my IV in and drew blood. And then she brought me out to, my labor room. And then it got crazy.
So, generally around that 6 centimeter point is when we kind of define transition from early labor to active labor, and contractions might get a little bit stronger once you get to that 6 centimeter point. Do you feel like that was the case with you? Do you feel like your contractions were noticeably different once you hit that 6 centimeter point?
I really don't. I really felt like they were pretty darn strong at 3 centimeters, which is why I was kind of a little bit stunned that I was 3 centimeters in triage. I mean, maybe. And I think the only difference that I know I noticeably felt was the zero station. So I remember feeling different when she checked me at an hour and a half later than when my doctor checked me, and just feeling that pressure different. So that certainly did feel different, but I would say the contractions were still pretty darn strong, and they were long and, close together. And then once I did get admitted, I got in the bath, and that made them better. I mean, they were still strong and just as close together, but I mean, that helped just because I was in the bathtub. So no, I would say I should have been 6 centimeters when I showed up. That's what they felt like.
Yeah. So talking about the bathtub, why did you think the bathtub was so helpful? I thought I remembered with Walter's labor, you kind of didn't really like the bathtub, if I remember right. But what about the bathtub made it just so much better coping with the pain?
I know, you're totally right, because I talked about that in Walter's birth, where I didn't have a bathtub room when I showed up to the hospital. I had a room with a shower, so I didn't even do a bath with him once I got admitted, but I took a bath or 2 or 3. I don't even remember, but I know I took at least one bath at home when I was in labor with him. And it just didn't feel good. And maybe it was my bathtub, because my bathtub's smaller than the one at the hospital. But just did not feel good. I filled it up enough and it was hot enough, but just for whatever reason did not feel great in Walter's birth. I remember the shower felt really, really good in Walter's birth, and just having the water kind of beating on my back when I was in labor with him. But with Ryland, it was weird. I hadn't taken a bath at this point. I took a shower at home, but I hadn't taken a bath yet in labor with him once I got admitted. But I remember I really, really, I was like, Judy, get me a bathroom. I just want to get in the bathtub. I think that's going to feel really, really good. So I, got in the bath, and that was definitely just being completely immersed in water. Almost, I couldn't, it's not, you can't get it quite up to your whole belly, but really, pretty much my whole lower back and my lower abdomen and stuff was submerged in water. And I think it helps so much just with the heat, obviously. And I think just you're more buoyant, I guess is the right word, when you're in water. So the pressure feeling was a little bit better. And it just, I think it was just everything kind of comboed together. That certainly helped me pain wise, and just it was just nice sitting in the bathtub and having Brian sitting in there with me instead of just being in the bed. I don't know, it was I enjoyed it.
So let's talk about other things that you were doing during this time. Your Birth It Up course talks a lot about different techniques that moms can use during labor. So did you use any of those techniques while you were in labor with Ryland?
Yeah, no, I totally did. I remember thinking, and I think I said this during my pregnancy to you guys, and my audience and stuff, that the one thing that I wanted to really, really focus on with Ryland, with this birth, was relaxing, because I knew the impact that had, and I knew that I sucked at that with Walter. I just could not relax with each contraction. So I really, really focused on relaxing and doing that ragdoll and just relaxing all parts of my body, and prepping my husband and telling him that that's what I needed from him to tell me to relax with each contraction, because I struggle with that so much. So I definitely did the ragdoll. I did lots of breathing, deep, super, super deep breathing. Later on in labor, I did horse lips a whole lot, which I did not, think that I was going to latch onto that so much. And that be the one thing that really actually helped me when I was really, really deep into labor, but did horse lips, did Raggedy Ann, ragdoll a whole lot, did a whole lot of breathing, did a whole lot of position changes, hands, lots of hands and knees. And I remember doing position changes and just kind of not being as concerned with, okay, I got to do this position change, and then I got to do this position change, and then I got to do this position change, but more just kind of listening to my body and saying, okay, this felt good. I'm going to keep doing this. This doesn't feel good. I'm not going to do this as much. But yeah, I would say it's funny that, yeah, I teach all of this stuff in my labor course, but I knew for myself what I truly needed to focus on was the relaxation, more so than the mental tricks and thinking that it's not, eventually it's going to be over, all of this stuff. I needed the relax for sure.
Yeah, I'm sure it's different with every person
Yeah.
and even with every labor too.
For sure.
So, going to breaking your water, did it break on its own, or did you have the doctor have to break it for you?
Yeah. So same with Walter's birth, I had her break it. And it was actually the same doctor who delivered. So that was kind of cool. And with Ryland, yeah, same thing. I eventually had her come in and break my water. And I was 8 centimeters at that point. So I was laboring in the tub for a while. And then finally, Judy checked me. Actually, it was probably only an hour after I got admitted because things were gearing up. And she checked me because I was just curious, what I was, because things were gearing up. And she was like, "Oh, you're 8 centimeters. You're 8 centimeters already." And that was only another hour after I got admitted. And I was like, "Okay, great. That's still great progress." And she was like, "Do you want me to call, the doctors to come, Dr. Wheeler to come and break your water?" And I was like, and I contemplated for a second because I was like, do I really want to? I mean, I feel good at that point. And the only reason I contemplated was because I remember the crazy transition from Walter's birth of it being a whole lot more painful, the contractions being a whole lot more painful with him. So I was nervous and just oh, do I really actually want to do that? Yeah, I do, because I want this, I want to speed this up and I want to get this over with. Looking back, I'm glad that I still did, but I mean, I probably didn't have to, but I'm still glad that I did. I mean, I think it was the right decision. But yeah, so she then came in. It was about 2:00, I think, when Judy checked me, and I was 8 centimeters, and then Dr. Wheeler probably came 15 or 20 minutes after that and broke my water. And thankfully, what I remembered with Walter didn't as quite happen with Ryland. The transition wasn't immensely more painful immediately after I got my water broken. So after I had those first few contractions after my water, I was like, okay, all right, this was the right decision. I'm good. So, and at that point I still thought, at that point I hadn't stalled yet. So I'm still thinking okay, this is good progress. I'm still going, hopefully this is going to speed up and we're going to have a baby really, really soon.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that was not as much the case.
Did you end up getting any pain medication during this labor? Did you wind up getting an epidural? Did you ask for an epidural at any point?
Yeah. So I did end up getting a dose of pain medication. I didn't end up getting an epidural. I didn't end up doing nitrous because that wasn't even available with all the COVID stuff going on. But I did get one dose of it's called fentanyl that we use at our hospital. I got 2 with Walter, so I only got 1 with this one, which, who cares? I went into this birth knowing that I wanted to try and do it without anything, but I wasn't going to beat myself up at all if I decided that I wanted to get a dose of fentanyl, because I did help so much with Walter, just relaxing me. And I did end up getting it. It was about an hour before he was born. So yeah, timeline wise, broke my waters, probably 2:20, 2:15. And then I'm laboring. And eventually I think Judy checked me at about 3, and I was 9.5 centimeters at that point. Maybe it was a little bit before 3, probably 2:45. And I was 9.5 centimeters. So I was still like moving quickly, because that's another 1.5 centimeters, and, thinking like, okay, this is great. And then it was probably 30 minutes later, maybe even longer, that I'm like, why am I still pregnant? And I'm like going through these contractions, and they're like super, super crazy, crazy intense. I'm throwing the relaxation factor out the window. I'm super, super tense with all of them because they were super, super painful, but also because I'm getting in my own head that, oh my gosh, I'm stalling. Why am I stalling? Why am I still pregnant? And that's naturally tensing me up so much. So yeah, eventually it was probably 3:30. So Ryland was born at 4:35. So it's probably 3:30. And I was like, okay, guys, what the heck's going on? Like, I need some, I'm like starting to scream at this point. I'm like, with my contractions, like it's bad at this point. And I'm like, Judy, if I know I'm a rim, or 9.5 centimeters, that's pretty much what a rim is. But I mean, can I get a dose of fentanyl? Like, I feel like I cannot relax with these contractions. Like, what the heck? Why am I still pregnant? What do you want me to do? And Judy was like, yeah, it's fine. Like, we can do this. That probably would really, really help you to actually relax for a little bit and get a little bit of a break. And then hopefully we can do a couple position changes and you'll have your baby. So yeah, eventually I did get that dose, and that did, I do not regret that at all. That was great. Those few contractions, certainly didn't last for very long. It probably, quote unquote, lasted for 15 or 20 minutes of contractions that were more tolerable, still very, very painful contractions, but more tolerable. But really the difference that I felt was in between, I could relax and close my eyes and relax my bottom completely. So yeah, no regrets on the fentanyl.
Yeah. So when you kind of explained your birth story in your Instagram story, you mentioned you were stalling at a lip. So is that what you're talking about? Kind of stalling right at the very end? Because I know a lot of DMs were getting sent like, what does stalling at a lip mean? So is that what it means? Because I don't know what it means.
Yeah. So a lip and a rim are kind of the same. It's a little bit different, but yeah, basically it's like 9.5 centimeters. You're almost done, but there's still some cervix kind of all the way around, and it's still like a little bit thick. So yeah, that's kind of what ended up happening. I stalled, and I was not, that for some reason, that last little 0.5 centimeter was not going away. And I was doing all of these things and getting in my own head, like, why the heck am I not, am I still pregnant? So yeah, ended up stalling for almost 2 hours. It was an hour and a half, but I don't know exactly when she checked me, before, when I was like at a rim, or I was probably a rim, or a lip before that. But yeah, ended up stalling, and that was mentally, gosh, it was also in the middle of the night. So I was tired because it was in the middle of the night. But I hadn't been, I guess at this point, laboring total for this long. So I didn't feel as drained as I did with Walter. I remember that difference, that I had been laboring all day with Walter, like starting at 7 o'clock in the morning, 7 or 7:30 in the morning. So by the time I got to kind of an hour before he was born, I was just exhausted because it was still in the middle of the night, and I had been laboring all day. So I do remember that was better, but I was mentally exhausted because I was getting in my own head, like, oh my gosh, why am I still pregnant? Why am I stalling? I'm not supposed to stall. I remember even thinking like, I teach birth classes. Why the freak am I why am I stalling? Like, oh, this is not working. Like, what? So yeah, no, that was totally mentally, emotionally, and physically, I mean, draining, just stalling for that amount of time and not, you're doing these things. Judy's like doing these position changes with me. I'm saying things like, maybe I should try this, or, I'm like trying to do everything not to just pull my hair out and be like, I need to get an epidural. And I guess to answer that other question of like, did I ask for epidural? Yes, absolutely. I asked for an epidural at, I don't even know what time it was, but it was, shortly before he was born. But yeah, that was another thing that happened, that same exact thing happened with Walter. And I should have just known it during labor. But of course you're not thinking straight when you're in labor at all. But I was like, do I need to get an epidural, guys? Like, do I need to get, like, maybe I should just get an epidural and then I can push him out, or I'll eventually get to 10 and I can, and things will move. Like, I can't do this. Like, this is no go. Like, if I'm going to stall for another hour, like I might die. So yeah, totally mentally and emotionally exhausting for sure.
I know too, I came and saw you the morning, I worked the day that you had him. So I was able to come and see you just 2 hours or so after you delivered.
Yeah.
And I remember specifically talking to the two nurses, Judy and Nellie, that, were with you pretty much throughout your whole labor. And both of them also said how exhausting it was and emotional it was for them to watch their friend and coworker, go through all of this. When we see women stall, not that it doesn't happen around that 9 centimeter point, but a lot of times it's a little earlier on in labor. Maybe you're stalling at 6 or 7 centimeters for a couple of hours, but to be at 9.5 centimeters, and like we talked about earlier, knowing what I mean, we see women all the time going from, I've seen people go from 6 centimeters to 10 centimeters and having a baby within 10 minutes. It can be very, very fast. So I can only imagine how hard that was for you, for Brian, for the nurses that were taking care of you, to just witness that for so long. What do you think? Why do you think you stalled? Do you have anything in hindsight now looking back? Do you think it was how he was positioned? Do you think it was a mental block? I mean, there's a lot of reasons that we talk about why women stall. Do you have any thoughts of why that might have happened?
I think it was a combination. I think it was his position and just the way that he was, because he did end up at the very end. He was definitely OP the whole time. And then at the very end, he spun and he came out not OP. He came out, normal. So I think it was just his position and my pelvis, just knowing, I don't think it was anything that I did. I don't think there was anything that I really could have done. I don't think there was anything like physically that I could have done to really like speed it up. Like, oh gosh, if I had just done this one position, I probably wouldn't have stalled. No, I think it was just, it was his position in there. Maybe there's something I could have done, but I mean, I was doing it all. I was doing everything that I knew to do. So I don't think physically I could have done anything differently. I think mentally, yes, that definitely played a part, and I probably stalled because I was focusing on that. Oh my gosh, I'm starting to stall. Why am I not pregnant? Why am I not pregnant? And that probably lengthened it even more, because I remember at one point, was it after I got the fentanyl? I'm not sure, but I was on the monitor at one point after I'd started to kind of stall. It was probably another 15, 20 minutes after she had checked me and I was a rim, and I'm like, what's going on? And I was on the monitor, and I remember my contractions. I looked at my contractions and they were it's called coupling. So I was having one, and then it wouldn't quite go all the way down to baseline. And then I would have another one kind of right afterwards. And then I wouldn't have one for like 4 minutes. And me knowing in my brain, like, crap, this is a crappy contraction pattern to be at 9.5 centimeters. Crap. Like, what's going on? Like, I need to like, we need to do something. Like, I need to get out of this. Do I need to get, and I remember saying to Judy, I was like, maybe need to give me a little Pitocin to get out of this contraction pattern. And I don't even know if she did, honestly. Like, I remember consenting to that, to being like, hey, maybe you need to give me a little bit of Pitocin to get out of this contraction pattern. And yeah, I remember thinking that and being like, crap, I'm starting to couple. My contraction pattern is starting to fail. Like, what's going on? So yeah, totally mental. I think if I had just taken that factor completely away, maybe I wouldn't have stalled at all. But I think it was honestly his position too. I mean, you can't completely blame it on the fact that I was a labor and delivery nurse and I was way too like involved and just, thinking way too much critically and critically about the situation. I think it was honestly, his having another OP labor.
So let's transition into you pushing. So what did that look like from stalling for what felt like forever and then finally being able to push?
Yeah, so that was certainly relief. But I didn't push at 10 centimeters and for a little, like, I remember I was pushing involuntarily for a little bit. I don't even know how long, but for a little bit before I was quote unquote, I would say I was like pushing, right? Like actively pushing, like with each contraction. So yeah, I remember I was like pushing on hands and knees for a little while. I got back in the bathtub and I was pushing for a little while, just like I was trying so hard because I'm like, I need to get this last little bit of centimeter to go away. So I was just grunting and like trying to push this dang baby down. I was mad at this point. So yeah, but once I got to 10 centimeters, I remember there was one bad contraction that Judy checked me, and she was like internally checking me and trying to push with me on hands and knees. And it was like the most painful thing ever. And finally I was like pushing on hands and knees. And she was like, okay, oh, it went away. You're definitely 10, it's gone, Liesel, you're good. And I was like, oh, thank God. So then I was like, can I flip over yet? I remember saying that to her. And she was like, yeah, no problem. You can flip over. Cause I was having hands and knees felt really good during his labor. And her doing lots of counter pressure during labor. And I didn't even talk about that. But she did like a freaking ton of counter pressure and that felt amazing. And she couldn't push hard enough. So props to counter pressure and doing that. But anyways, yeah, finally I was pushing and I pushed a little bit on my hands and knees and I hated it. I was like, no, I need to flip over and either do kind of like sideline or kind of like on my back pushing, because that felt way better. So finally flipped over, started, pushing with each contraction. And I remember I was doing like, just, if you want to call it open glottis, you can call it open glottis. I was just screaming my head off pushing at this point, for a few contractions. But finally, once I felt good and I got for a few contractions and I was really like grunting, bearing down good, realizing that I was doing open glottis, but it wasn't like the good kind of open glottis. It was just like, I was just screaming my head off and just pushing in my face and not like controlled pushing. So finally, once I got into control pushing, yeah, it was 15 minutes later, I pushed with probably 4 or 5 contractions. And she called my doctor and she came in and delivered him, and then he came right out. So yeah, pushing was good. I mean, pushing, I remember that hurting a lot more than I remember it hurting with Walter, but also that was 3.5 years ago that I had Walter. So it probably did hurt just the same, but yeah, it was good mentally because I was finally like, okay, this is about to happen. I'm about to be done. But also it didn't feel so good because who likes to really push a baby out?
Yeah, we talk about that though a lot, like with the patients that we take care of, and getting to that 10 centimeter point is so amazing.
Oh,
like
yes.
It's the most, I mean, outside of actually delivering, it's the probably most relief that you'll feel throughout your whole entire labor. And I tell people a lot, because unless you've had a baby before, and especially unless you've had a baby, naturally without an epidural.
Yeah.
you think about that pushing time, and I think that's what a lot of women go into labor fearful of pushing, physically having to push the baby out sounds horrifying,
It
right?
does. Yes.
Right. So it's always so interesting to me, and we watch this every single day, but when you finally get to that point, it's the first time that you have a sense of control. I like to
Yes.
say throughout your entire labor, these contractions are just coming, 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 coming. There's nothing you can do about them. They're just
Yep.
getting worse and closer together. And finally, when you hit that 10 centimeter point is when you get to take control of your body again for the first time in what feels like hours or days for some women.
Yeah.
And you get to do anything and everything that you can to get that baby out. And as much as it hurts, there's also something like, the harder I push, the sooner, the faster this will happen.
Yeah,
And I'm sure that you got into that point of just saying, okay, I can finally do this now safely. And, there's no cervix left. And the harder I push, the faster he'll be here.
Yes. Yes. And it was, I want to say I was more aware in Walter's birth of getting to the pushing phase than I was in Ryland's birth. I remember just being mad in Ryland's birth and being like, why am I not to this point? Okay, I'm finally to this point, thank God. But like, why the heck did it take me this long? And just me being like mad. But yeah, that feeling of just being to the point of, okay, I can actually do something was so good. And I remember Judy even saying that during labor still, with when I was having contractions and when I was like starting to stall, she was like, I know it's awful. Like once I know you're ready to get to to get to pushing, because yeah, you are having these contractions. You can't do anything about them. You just have to take them and know that eventually you're going to get to that point, but you just have to let them come and go. And pushing is just, I mean, you said it perfectly, that it's just a relief, almost like not a relief because it still hurts, but it's just mentally, you're like, okay, even if this is 2 hours, I'm at least at the point of me feeling like I'm actually working and I'm actually like pushing my baby down, and this is going to happen at some point.
So another question that I had that some of your followers have asked you, we're going to get into more information about your recovery in the next podcast that we do. But quickly, I know that you had a secondary perineal tear, which is what you had with Walter. While you were pushing, did you feel like you could feel yourself tearing? I know previously when I had both of my babies, the first one with an epidural, I could feel the tear a little bit, surprisingly, with an epidural. Like I remember that. But my second baby without an epidural, it kind of all ran together.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you felt anything? Because a lot of your followers have asked that and have expressed, fear even of, oh my gosh, that must be horrible. Not just A, pushing a baby out, but B, like feeling yourself tear.
Ouch.
I know. I don't even want to answer this question because I don't want to like scare people, but yeah, I totally did feel that. But was I scared of it, or like, did I come away with it being like, oh my God, that was like the worst thing ever? No. I mean, I definitely felt it and I was like, oh yeah, it tore. I don't know what degree that was, but yeah, that didn't feel so good. But I also was like, thank God I'm tearing. He's about to freaking come out of me. So it was also that too. So it was like, okay, ow, but also yay.
Yay. Right.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, on a lighter note, what was your first thought when you found out you had a boy?
I know. Honestly, it wasn't as like, as like, like, oh my God, he's a boy, because I was just like, thank God he's out of me. I'm traumatized that it took, not truly traumatized, but traumatized that it took this freaking long. And yeah, I was just like, oh my God, like what? And I remember thinking beforehand, and I think I told somebody in triage or something, I was like, yeah, because they asked me, okay, do you want, I know don't know what you're having. Do you want to announce, or do you want your husband to announce? He's like, yeah, I want Brian to announce. But guess who announced? It was me, because I was like, I'm done. What is it? Oh, it's a boy. So I remember him coming out and seeing, and Brian, I think, was covering his eyes like at this point, because he was covering his eyes. I'm sure he was, like, during most of my contractions at the end, not because he was like horrified at him coming out of me, but just like, because he, genuinely like hates to hear me in agony. So he's like, oh God, please let this be over. Please let this be over soon. So he's like kind of like shielding his eyes. And so I remember, somebody saying like, Brian, and then me immediately being like, it's a boy, and him not saying anything. And he was just like, he's, fine. He didn't care. He was like probably glad that I looked and I said it and he didn't say it. But he immediately started crying like, oh my gosh, like, and he didn't care either way, like girl or boy, but I think we were both just so happy to be done, because it was just so long that I was in that agonizing stall at the very, very end. He was just as I'll call it traumatized, because he had to hear me kind of go through that again. But I think he'll say that he took away, he coming away from it, it was more positive for him, because he really, really genuinely helped me this time. And poor thing, he didn't help me too much at all with Walter's birth. It was more my nurses and him, being there and being sweet. But he, with this one, 100% was my mental, my person that was like, relax, you're doing a good job, positive the whole time. And I don't ever remember him being the way that he was with Walter, and being like, just quiet, and me knowing that he's having a hard time. I only remember him being really, really positive to me, which is exactly what I needed and exactly what I told him beforehand, before going into this labor. So him, just at that point of us having a boy, we were more happy, way more happy that he was just like freaking out of me and I was done with that stupid stalling, than he was a boy. But gosh, I was surprised that he was a boy, but I also wasn't. I think I would have been surprised either way. I would have been surprised that if he was a girl, just because I had a boy previously, and oh my gosh, like he's, oh, I have a girl now. I don't know. I think I would have been surprised either way. I was just happy, honestly, that he was out of me.
Yeah, so that's something I'm curious about, attending births. I think you could probably ask any labor and delivery nurse, and they all would agree that the surprise genders are the best, right?
Yes.
Like they're the best. And I think that's probably why, a big reason, at least, why you chose with Walter and with this baby to have it be a surprise reveal.
Yeah.
I know that's why I chose it for my first baby. I've been in those deliveries before, and it's so, so cool.
Yeah.
But it's funny with mine, we had a feeling that my son was a boy the whole entire time, so I didn't feel overly surprised. For me, it didn't have that same like wow factor. Like seriously, I think that in people that I don't even know, like, I come into their birth and it's a surprise reveal and it's so exciting. Like I think it was more exciting for me to be in other people's deliveries, than my own. And I contributed that to me just because like labor blows and I was just ready to be done. And like with my first son, I pushed for over 2 hours and I was just over it. And I didn't even give a crap like what came out of me at that point. Do you feel like that was the similar feeling for you? Or like, how did it compare, Walter coming out being a boy and Ryland coming out being a boy? Did you have similar feelings about the gender part of it and being surprised?
I feel like it was probably more cool the first time. I do. Yeah, I think it was more cool the first time. It was still cool. But Yeah, I would say that first time. Now going like, I mean, if there is a third baby, I don't know if there is going to be, but probably not, but who knows? I don't know. Like, I think I would do
Yeah.
gender again.
That's what I was curious about.
Yeah,
like,
I think
would you do it again?
No, I don't know. I mean, I think I would because yeah, it's super cool and just, but also, yeah, I don't know. I'm also curious what it's like now to know. Yeah.
Yeah, because like with me, we found out the gender of our second one for a multitude of reasons that I won't go into now. But I thought it was interesting to see it both ways, actually. Good and bad both ways, really. But I also think just knowing you personally and talking to you every single day like I do, I think that it drove you more crazy this time, not knowing the gender, right?
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
You were totally fixated on it and so annoyed in those final weeks because you just wanted to know if it was a boy or a girl.
And you kept going back and forth, and like everybody on Instagram was like guessing, which made it even more agonizing to find out. Yeah, definitely.
It was fun. It was super fun, and I'm super glad that I did it the way that I did it. But yeah, I don't know if I don't know. I would be really curious if there is a third baby. I would be really curious, and I would really, really think hard. Like, okay, do I want to truly do a surprise gender? But no, you're totally right that it was way harder this time, and it was harder in the last weeks. I don't remember that being like that with Walter's birth. Now, granted, I didn't have mommy labor nurse. I didn't have anything, my life is completely different now. And there's a lot of factors, involved, but yeah, I don't remember that like me being so annoyed almost at the very, very end of like, I don't even want to think about how many more weeks I possibly have of being pregnant. I just want to be done because I just want to know if this dang baby is a boy or girl.
I would imagine that mommy labor nurse is probably a huge contributing factor because everyone thought you were having a girl. Like, I know. Everyone, right? I know. The whole time. From how you carried differently and your belly looked differently and you carried higher instead of lower. I thought I was. And your watermelon obsession. So many people thought that. And so a lot of you guys don't know this, but Jenna said boy from the very beginning, right? She said boy from the very beginning. And I probably was more boy side than girl side. But I think that was just me being selfish. I wanted you to have another boy because I have two boys and, I just wanted you to have another boy. Yeah. But it's funny. We talked about your followers and how everyone thought it was a girl. I mean, like 85% probably of people thought you're having a girl. Yeah. And we kind of hoped that it would be a boy just to like stick it to him in some weird way. And Jenna said that too, where she was like, I'm just saying boy because everyone else is saying girl. Like, I don't even know. Jenna, did you really truly think that Liesel was going to have a boy, or was it like, nah, I'm just, I'm going to say boy because everyone else is saying girl?
I mean, that was definitely part of it, but I truly thought you were having a boy. I've always imagined you as a boy mom. Yeah. And I even remember like in high school, you babysat 3 boys for a couple of years. And I just always pictured you as a boy mom. I don't know what it was. I had a feeling, man.
Yeah, you were right, obviously. Yeah. I remember being very surprised when I came into your room after delivery. And because, Liesel and I talked about how she wanted to share the gender with me. And when she was going up to the hospital at 11 or 11:30 at night, I was like, no, I cannot wait until I get to work at 6:30 or 7 tomorrow to find out the gender. I thought for sure you were going to have a baby by like 2 a.m.
Yeah. Well, that's why.
I was like, you need to FaceTime me as soon as you feel, composed and whatnot. You need to FaceTime me. But then when I got the text at 5 or 5:15 in the morning saying that the baby was finally here, you asked me, do you want to know the gender? And I was like, no. I do not want to know the gender. I am leaving my house right now. I'm getting to work early. I want to find out when I get there.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was the first thing that I asked you, which looking back, I'm like, oh, I should have been like, congratulations, Liesel, on the birth of your baby.
I don't remember.
But no, you were in the bathroom and getting like cleaned up and whatnot. And I walked in and like, that's the first thing I blurted out was it a boy or a girl? And then I remember just being so excited. We both were so excited that it's another boy.
Oh, I was so excited.
So
Once it sunk in, like I wasn't, I'll be honest, I wasn't like immediately like, oh my God, I'm so happy it's a boy, blah, blah, blah. But it took a little bit. And then finally I was like, oh man, I have two boys. This is so dang cool. And me thinking about Walter, starting to think about Walter, like, cause hey, Walter also, along with Jenna, Walter was one of the only people who thought boy the whole time I was pregnant. I think there was a couple times when he would say girl. Like initially he did say girl, but then it was, 95% of the time when I would talk about, the baby, or he would say, he, or he would say brother. He was like, there's not a girl. I would love the baby if it was a girl, mommy, but it's a boy. So me, thinking about him, like, and just telling him that it's a brother and just getting so excited to tell him. And then just like thinking about having two boys. Yeah. Like then it was like, oh, I'm so happy. I'm so happy that he's a boy. It would have been fine if he was a girl, but I'm really happy he's a boy.
Yeah. Well, all in all, going through, your entire birth story, is there anything that kind of surprised you about your labor? Like, how did it compare to Walter's? Anything you didn't really expect to happen that happened?
Yeah. So I would say compare-wise to Walter, it was shorter. Obviously, it was only 8 or 9 total hours. The hospital time when I was at the hospital to delivery was about the same. And yeah, obviously I think I pushed a little bit. I pushed longer with Walter. We'll get into the recovery at a later point, another episode, but my recovery was way easier with Ryland. Obviously I didn't stall with Walter, but I remember the mental load being similar with Walter compared to Ryland, but it was way more intense and emotionally, mentally harder for me during Ryland's birth, just with the whole stalling factor and me, stalling at the centimeter that I did. And then let's see, anything that I didn't expect to happen. Yeah, obviously I did not expect to stall with Ryland at all. I thought I genuinely, I prepped myself for a long labor, knowing that like I could be wrong. This could take longer than I expected. But I genuinely thought that once things got going, that things were going to progress and I was going to have a baby pretty quickly. Just seeing so many second labors in my time, in taking care of patients and them going so much quicker typically than first labors, and people not having, not stalling, like things just kind of like just go because your body just remembers that you did this once before. So it's just naturally going to be easier and quicker. So me certainly not expecting to stall and not expecting it to, to happen kind of the way that it happened. And I will say that was certainly, it took a little while for me to process that. And I'm totally fine now, but yeah, I would say it definitely took a little bit for me to be like, wow, I went into this with expectations. And I tell you guys this, like, to not go into your labor with these expectations of like, it's going to be a fast labor. It's going to happen like this. It's, going to, have an open mind, do all of this. And yeah, I didn't really completely take my own advice, because I did go into this labor expecting that things were going to go really fast, and it didn't. And it took me a little bit to kind of process that. Another thing that happened with him that didn't happen with Walter was his heart rate did dip, and I was on the monitor with him at the end, and I remember his Ryland's heart rate dipping, and me hearing that and me being scared, like genuinely scared, like, oh my gosh. And it was down for a while. Me being nervous, like, oh my gosh, am I going to have to go and have an emergency C-section really, really quick? Or is she going to have to put a vacuum on and vacuum him out really, really quick? Or is he going to come out and not be crying and then have to stimulate? I mean, things are going through my head as I'm pushing him out. So that was also something that I didn't expect to happen. And that took a little bit of time for me to process. And I think me taking that experience and having that second experience happen, and having different things happen, I can now come away from things. Not, I don't consider this birth to be like quote unquote traumatic, but I didn't get my expectations completely met. And me knowing how that feels and how that has taken time now, like it just, gosh, I feel a whole lot more for people who have babies who come out and, need resuscitation, or things really truly did not go the way that you wanted them to go. And I mean, yeah, I didn't, like I said, it wasn't like I didn't completely dip my toes all the way into it. I didn't have any sort of like truly, truly traumatic birth, but like, gosh, I kind of did have some things that were a little bit traumatizing, and wow, it gave me some feelings, and it took me a little bit time to process. So how important, that is to kind of teach, I guess, other people. So,
yeah, I mean, yeah. I think that's a good point to kind of hit on in general. May it be your pregnancy or your birth or your first, journey into motherhood afterwards, recovery wise or breastfeeding wise or sleeping wise.
Yeah.
We've talked a lot over the last, year and a half as I became a new mom even, and the expectations that you have in your mind of what,
right,
this whole experience is going to be, and how that reality comes into it. And oftentimes they don't meet, they don't hit,
they don't.
Right. And something that, has taken me well over a year to finally process, with you talk about your, labor experience. With me, it was my breastfeeding experience with my first son. And it's grief almost, and a lot of other feelings too, but grief almost, where, hear what you think is going to happen. And you've got these, now I wouldn't even say high expectations in your head. I mean, it's very reasonable for your second baby for you to have thought in your head that it was going to go differently. Yeah. And it was faster overall. I mean, it was close to 24 hours of labor with Walter, and Ryland was 8 hours, so overall faster. A lot of women would look at that with positivity, but, I think that's something important for new moms and second time moms and 10th time moms, is to just realize that, you're of course going to have some expectations of how, pregnancy and labor and delivery and motherhood is going to be. But just, it's okay to be sad or angry, even, or disappointed when something didn't go exactly how you did. But I think it's really important, and I'm happy that you recognize this. You've been very vocal to us about this over the last 2 weeks since he was born, and how things just didn't align how you thought it was going to be. But I think it's the awareness that you have this time, and the fact that you, recognize that things didn't go exactly as you thought they were, and that's okay. But that it's also okay to be upset and sad about it. And, processing that information takes time, and it can be really emotional. Having a baby and having the hormonal changes that having a baby comes with, and then dealing with, this expectation versus reality thing that comes along with it. So I'm glad that, you have been so vocal about it, and verbalizing that even on here right now is so important, so that other, women know going into this experience that it's okay. And even Liesel, mommy labor nurse, who is labor and delivery nurse, who, is such an amazing support for women all over the world, has, it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's okay. You're real. You're a real person. And, just for everyone to know out there that there's bound to be something. And I tell, friends of mine that don't have any kids or are pregnant or whatever, I'm like, what happens during pregnancy and during labor and delivery and sleeping wise with your baby and having a newborn, like, just be prepared. Like, things aren't going to go how they intended to. And like, this is a perfect time to practice how to start to deal and adapt to change, because
there's a lot.
That's what being a mom is all about, I think, is just nothing ever goes exactly how you're going to. And your labor didn't go how you thought it was going to be. And I guarantee you there's a billion more things that are going to happen over the course of Ryland's life that are not going to go how you thought they were going to go.
Totally. Yeah, I think that's a great way to end it too. Jenna, did you have any last questions for me as somebody who has not? I feel like I've been trying to talk to Tiffany. I can talk to Tiffany in like nurse Liesel and nurse Tiffany, but sometimes, I've been trying to like talk, I don't know, differently to her, like, because but did you have anything last to ask me, just as somebody who is not pregnant? At least I don't think you're pregnant, right? Is not pregnant, but is not pregnant, but doesn't have any kids, because a lot of these people who are listening, a lot of my listeners are first time moms who don't have the experience and who are kind of like you, who, don't have really an experience of having a first baby, or don't really know anything about pregnancy or labor.
No, I mean, kind of going off what Tiffany said, like, before I even started working for you, or just, learning more about pregnancy, labor, delivery, postpartum, all of that stuff, I kind of, you see pictures on the internet of like pretty pregnant people and like you with your fresh newborn, all perfect, poised looking, but that's not it. The reality is there's so many things that can happen that you don't expect, and it's not rainbows and butterflies, there's just so much to it, and it's different for everybody. So, and I mean, even me being, 24 years old, being like, oh, I just want to be pregnant and have a baby. Like, it's not that simple. There's just so much to it that you don't realize, like the exhaustion mentally, physically, and I really just love that you're on your platform. You can share that. Like, it's not all perfect. There's just so much to it.
I think that's very, very apparent in stuff that I do, is that I don't sugarcoat things for a reason, ever, because I don't think that birth or labor or anything about motherhood like needs to be sugarcoated. You need to talk about positivity, right? Like, super
of
positive.
course.
That's super, super important, and that's very, very important to me to shed light on. Is like, yes, we got to shed light on the positivity, but we have to be real and raw here and not sugarcoat how crappy labor might be, or how crappy postpartum might be, or how crappy breastfeeding might be, or you might have these issues, you might have this might happen, because if you sugarcoat everything and you just see these social media images of other people that you follow, and like, it's just, they look perfect and like motherhood looks so great. Then you're setting people up for negative experiences almost, because it's 100%. It's not like that.
And I mean, comparing yourself to other people, I think that's just, inbred in women to do that, to compare themselves.
For sure.
It comes to head probably more real than it's ever been before, of the comparison factor, after having a baby, and how one person is to the next person is. And, as hard as it is to not compare yourself, it's you so much healthier to just, this is me, this is my story, this is my baby, this is how my baby is, and I'm not saying that, talking to other women isn't helpful. I mean, I'm a firm believer that talking it's so therapeutic and it's so important. And I'm very vocal about my experience after having, my first baby and struggles that I went through with other women, because it is so helpful. But yeah, I think that, like we said before, it's such an amazing thing that you're able and feel comfortable enough to share in-depthly, with your followers and women around the world, exactly what happened, and being very real and very raw with it. And I can imagine that it's been, a helpful thing for women all over to have seen that from you.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, good. Well, I think that's a perfect way to end things. Thank you guys for joining me today. I think this was a good takeaway for people. I know a lot of people wanted to hear my birth story with Ryland in detail. So I hope for everybody listening that you took some, you enjoyed this and you took a lot away from this. And next episode, we're going to do, maybe not the next one that's going to come out, but the next kind of group, we are going to do another follow-up on this and talk more about recovery, because I know you guys have had a lot of questions about that as well. So stay tuned for part 2 of this episode. All right. Thanks, guys. All right, so that is it for this episode of the Mommy Labor Nurse podcast. You probably follow me on Instagram because that's probably where you came from. But if you don't, head over to Instagram and follow me at mommy.labornurse for more. That is certainly where I am most active. I also now have a separate Instagram for just this podcast, so I encourage you to follow my second account at mommylabornurse.podcast as well if you want podcast updates. Again, that is at mommylabornurse.podcast. As always, you guys know that I also have a website where I have tons of articles all about pregnancy, birth, breastfeeding, newborn stuff, and more at www.mommylabornurse.com. I want to hear more from you on how much you love this episode of the podcast or how you think I can improve. So leave me a comment on one of my pictures, send me a DM, or send me an email with all the love. All right, guys, I will see you same time, same place next week.